Have you ever had a moment when you stopped, really stopped, and suddenly felt that the world around you was bigger than anything you'd ever noticed before? Maybe it was when you sat quietly in your room one night, just before bed. You whispered. A prayer, maybe not even a formal one, just a simple thought of gratitude. In that moment, you weren't worrying about tomorrow's schedule or your endless to-do list. For just a few seconds, your mind was still. And in that stillness, you felt something, a sense of calm, a quiet presence that seemed to stretch. Beyond you. Or maybe it was during a walk in the park. You slowed down, listened to the sound of the leaves moving with the wind, heard a bird call from far away. And strangely, you felt connected, like the world was speaking to you in a language without words. These are what people call spiritual acts. They don't always look dramatic. They don't always happen in temples, churches, or ceremonies. Sometimes, they're hidden in the most ordinary parts of life, a journal entry of gratitude, lighting a candle to remember someone you love, or simply lifting your head to look at the stars and realizing, I'm alive. I'm here. And that is enough. What's special about these acts is that they don't just soothe us in the moment. They leave a mark. It's like planting a seed in your soul. And over time, that seed grows into trust, into inner strength, into invisible threads of connection between you and others. This explains why, in today's fast, noisy world, so many people are searching for these little acts of spirituality. Not out of superstition, not even just because of religion, but because we all long for an anchor, a reminder that we are not drifting alone. Think back to the last time you did something purely out of kindness. Maybe you helped someone carry their groceries, or simply gave a stranger a warm smile. Didn't your heart feel lighter afterward? Or maybe you sat in silence under the open sky, watching clouds drift lazily by. Did you feel your mind slowing down, as if life itself was whispering, it's okay. You're part of something bigger. These moments, so simple, so small, are proof spirituality isn't far away. It's not hidden in some distant mountain or locked inside ancient rituals. It's already here, woven into the everyday rhythm of our lives, and that's the journey we are going on in this video. Together, we'll explore what exactly are spiritual acts, why do they matter, and how can you weave them into your own life so that you feel more peace, more meaning, and more connection, not just with yourself, but with the people around you and with the universe itself. So, if you've ever longed for a pause in the middle of your busy days, if you've ever wondered whether there's something sacred hidden inside ordinary life, come with me. Because sometimes, one small act is enough to change the way you experience everything. Part 1. What are spiritual acts, really? Let me take you back to a story. There was once a young woman who lived in a bustling city. Her days were filled with meetings, deadlines, and endless notifications on her phone. She moved so fast that sometimes she forgot to even taste her food. Life felt like a blur. One evening, exhausted, she sat on her balcony. For the first time in weeks, she looked up at the night sky, and she saw the stars, clear, quiet, timeless. She whispered softly, "Thank you." Just 2 words. No one else heard it. But for her, something shifted. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. That was a spiritual act. So what exactly makes something spiritual? It doesn't have to involve incense, mantras, or rituals, though those can be spiritual too. At its heart, a spiritual act is simply any action that brings you closer to peace, to meaning, or to something greater than yourself. It could be meditating in silence. It could be writing down 3 things you're grateful for. It could be holding someone's hand tightly and silently thanking life for their presence. The point is not what you do, but how you do it, and what it awakens inside you. See, spirituality isn't a distant, mysterious force. It's connection. Connection to yourself. Connection to others. Connection to the universe that holds us all. And spiritual acts? They are the bridges. They're the little doorways that open us into that state of connection. In today's world, this matters more than ever. Because without these small bridges, it's so easy to feel empty, disconnected, or lost. Life becomes nothing but tasks and noise. We wake up, rush through the day, collapse into bed, and wonder why we feel so hollowed. That's why spiritual acts are like resting places on our journey. They remind us, life isn't only about achievement, money, or success. It's about being present, feeling, connecting. And here's the beauty. You don't need to climb a mountain or join a monastery to find them. You can start exactly where you are, Right now. Part 2 Common forms of spiritual acts. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. A woman wakes up early, before the sun rises. The house is quiet. She lights a single candle, sits with a cup of tea, and places her hands gently together. She whispers a prayer, not for riches or success, but for strength, for peace, for the well-being of her family. That small moment, just a breath in the silence of dawn, that is a spiritual act. Now picture this. A young man, tired from a long week, decides to step outside instead of scrolling endlessly on his phone. He walks barefoot on the grass in his backyard. At first, he feels silly. But as the cool earth presses against his skin, something shifts. He feels grounded, alive, connected to the living world beneath his feet. That too is a spiritual act. And then there's the neighbor down the street. She spends her weekends cooking extra meals, quietly delivering them to people who don't have much. She doesn't post about it online. She doesn't seek recognition. She simply gives, with no expectation of return. That, my friend, is also a spiritual act. Spirituality wears many faces. For some, it's found in prayer. For others, in meditation. For others still, it appears in the everyday acts of kindness and compassion. And sometimes, it's as simple as stepping outside and noticing the wind on your face, the warmth of sunlight on your skin. Let's walk through some of the most common forms together, not as a checklist, but as open doors, doors you might choose to step through, depending on what your soul is longing for. 1. Prayer is one of humanity's oldest languages. But it doesn't always mean reciting memorized words or chanting in a sacred hall. Prayer, at its essence, is conversation. It's whispering to something greater than yourself, whether you call it God, the universe, or simply the deep wisdom within. Think about it. Haven't you ever whispered, "Please let this go well," before a big test, or quietly said thank you when life gave you a small blessing? Those are prayers too. They remind us we are not alone, that life is not just random noise. Prayer turns our fears into surrender, our gratitude into a bridge of connection. 2. Meditation and silence. Now, imagine sitting in stillness. No words, no requests, just you, your breath, and the quiet. This is meditation, not about emptying your mind completely, but about noticing what's already there. The busy thoughts, the hidden emotions, the restless energy, and letting them settle, like dust floating down in a sunbeam. People often say meditation is difficult. But what if it's simpler than we think? A minute of breathing with awareness before you check your phone. A pause in the middle of a crowded day, closing your eyes, listening to your heartbeat. That is meditation. And in those small pauses, we discover something profound. Silence isn't empty. It's full of answers. 3. Acts of kindness. There's another form of spirituality that doesn't happen alone. It happens between us. Every time you offer kindness, a smile, a helping hand, a word of encouragement, you're performing a spiritual act. I once heard someone say, "Service is the rent we pay for being alive." And in that sense, kindness becomes more than politeness. It becomes a way of honoring the sacredness of life itself. Because every person you meet is carrying invisible burdens. And one gentle act from you might be the light that helps them keep walking. 4. Connection with nature. And then, of course, there is the earth itself. Think of the last time you stood by the ocean, listening to the waves crash endlessly against the shore. Didn't you feel small, yet strangely whole? Or the last time you touched the bark of a tree that had been standing for decades, quietly breathing with you? These encounters with nature are not just pleasant, they are deeply spiritual. They remind us that we are not separate from life, but woven into it.I. In fact, many ancient traditions believed nature was the first temple, the first scripture. The stars, the rivers, the mountains, they were seen as sacred teachers. And when we slow down enough to notice them, we begin to hear their lessons again. So here's the truth. Spiritual acts aren't one size fits all. They come in many forms. For some, it's prayer. For others, meditation. For some, it's kindness or service. For others, it's nature. But what they all share is this: they bring us back to ourselves. They bring us back to the present. And they open us to something greater, something we can feel, but not always explain. And maybe the question isn't which one is right, but which one speaks to me right now. Because sometimes your soul longs for stillness. Sometimes it longs for connection. Sometimes it longs to give, and each time you listen to that longing, and act upon it, that's when a simple moment becomes a spiritual act. Part 3: Why Spiritual Acts Matter in Our Modern Lives. Let me tell you a story. A few months ago, I met a man at a cafe. He looked exhausted, the kind of tired that doesn't just come from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much. He told me about his job, constant emails, back-to-back meetings, the pressure to always be on. He admitted that he hadn't felt truly present in months. Even when he was home with his kids, his mind was racing somewhere else. I asked him what gave him peace. He thought for a while, then said quietly, "Sometimes, when I'm walking to the office, I pause for a second under this big old tree. Just stand there. I don't even know why. It feels different. Like for a moment, I can breathe again." That simple pause, that grounding moment under a tree, was his spiritual act. And it mattered more than he realized. You see, we live in a world that celebrates speed, productivity, constant connection. But here's the paradox. The more connected we are online, the more disconnected we often feel inside. Spiritual acts matter because they heal this gap. They slow us down. They remind us that being human isn't about how many tasks we finish in a day, but about how deeply we live each moment. Point 1. A cure for disconnection. Think about it. How often do we scroll for hours, searching for something that makes us feel alive, only to end up emptier than before? Spiritual acts, whether it's meditation, prayer, or a simple walk in nature, offer the opposite. They bring us back to ourselves. They restore that inner connection, the one that technology, noise, and business often erode. When you pause to breathe, when you whisper gratitude, when you help someone without expecting anything in return, you suddenly remember, yes, this is what it feels like to be alive. 2. Anchors in the storm. Modern life is unpredictable. Jobs change. Relationships shift. The news overwhelms us daily. It's easy to feel like we are caught in a storm with no ground beneath our feet. Spiritual acts become anchors. They don't stop the storm, but they keep us steady in the middle of it. Imagine meditation as your anchor, prayer as your anchor, kindness as your anchor. These practices give you something solid to hold on to when everything else feels uncertain. Point 3. Nourishment for the soul. Here's the truth. You can feed your body 3 meals a day, but if you never feed your soul, you'll still feel hungry. That's why people chase success, wealth, or recognition, and yet sometimes end up feeling empty. Spiritual acts nourish that deeper hunger, the one for meaning, for belonging, for peace. It doesn't take hours a day. Sometimes it's just a few breaths, a few words of gratitude, a few steps on the grass. But these small acts fill a deep well inside us, a well that nothing else can reach. Point 4. A bridge between us in a world that often feels divided by politics, by beliefs, by competition. Spiritual acts also remind us of our shared humanity. When you offer kindness, when you sit in silence, when you recognize the sacredness of nature, you realize we are all connected. Think of the last time someone truly listened to you without judgment. Didn't it feel spiritual in some way? Or the last time you comforted someone in pain, you weren't just doing a good deed. You were touching something sacred, something that words can't quite capture. So why do spiritual acts matter? Because they are not luxuries. They are necessities. Just as your body needs food and water, your soul needs stillness, connection, and meaning. Without them, we survive, but we don't truly live. With them, we not only endure the chaos of modern life, but we find beauty in the middle of it. And maybe that's the secret. Spiritual acts don't remove the noise of the world. They teach us how to hear the silence beneath it. Part 4. How spiritual acts shape identity and purpose. Let me ask you something. Who are you, really? Not your job title. Not the roles you play, parent, student, friend. Not even the labels others give you. But deep down, beneath all of that, who are you? Most of us spend years searching for that answer. Some look for it in achievements. Some look for it in relationships. Some look for it in possessions. But what if the truest version of yourself is revealed not through what you get, but through the spiritual acts you practice? 1. Spiritual acts as a mirror. Imagine this. A woman spends 10 minutes every morning in silent prayer. Over time, she notices her heart softening. She becomes more patient with her children, more forgiving of mistakes, more at ease with herself. Now, did the prayer change the world around her? Maybe not. But it changed her perception of it. And slowly, it also changed how she saw herself. Instead of identifying only as busy mom, She began to see herself as a soul in process, as someone who is both fragile and strong. Spiritual acts act like mirrors. They reflect back to us who we are becoming. And often, they reveal the parts of us we've ignored or forgotten. Point 2. The compass of purpose. Think of purpose as a compass, guiding your journey. Without it, you drift. With it, every step feels more intentional. But here's the secret. Purpose isn't always found in grand moments. Sometimes, it's discovered in the small spiritual practices you repeat daily. A man who volunteers at a shelter may realize that his deepest joy comes from service. Over time, service isn't just something he does, it becomes part of who he is. His purpose unfolds from his acts. Spiritual acts shape identity because they align us with what truly matters to us. They point us, again and again, toward the North Star of our lives. Point 3. Breaking the masks. Modern life often asks us to wear masks. At work, we wear the competent professional mask. With friends, the easygoing mask. Online, maybe the successful or perfect mask. But deep down, many people fear, what if no one ever knows the real me? Spiritual acts have a way of dissolving those masks. When you sit alone in meditation, there's no audience. When you offer kindness in secret, there's no spotlight. When you walk in the forest, there's no performance. These acts strip away the layers and bring you face to face with your truest self, and the more you practice them, the more courage you gain to live that self, not just in private, but out loud, in the world. Point 4. A story of becoming. I once heard the story of a man who spent years chasing success. He had the cars, the house, the respect, but he felt empty. Then one day, almost by accident, he joined a group that meditated together once a week. At first, he thought it was a waste of time. But slowly, something shifted. The silence he experienced in those sessions began to echo into his life. He realized he didn't want to be remembered for his possessions, but for his presence. That shift in identity didn't happen overnight. It unfolded through spiritual practice. And from that, he discovered a new purpose: to mentor others, to listen deeply, to live more fully aligned with his soul. So here's the truth. Your identity isn't something you buy, or even something you invent from scratch. It's something you uncover, layer by layer, through the spiritual acts you practice. And your purpose? It isn't a single destination you suddenly stumble upon. It's a path you walk, step by step, with each act of prayer, meditation, kindness, or connection. Because in the end, who you are is not defined by what the world demands of you, but by the practices that bring you back home, to yourself, to others, and to the sacred. Part 5. The collective impact of spiritual acts on society. Let me paint you a picture. A single candle in a dark room may seem small, almost insignificant. But light another candle from it. Then another. Soon, the whole room glows. What began as one small flame becomes something larger than itself. Spiritual acts work the same way. Alone, they transform the individual. But together, they can shift entire communities, even societies. Point 1. The ripple effect of small acts. Think of the last time someone showed you unexpected kindness. Maybe a stranger held the door when your arms were full, or a friend sent a message just when you needed it. It was a small act, but didn't it linger in your heart? That's the ripple effect. One person's spiritual act doesn't end with them. It travels outward. The kindness you receive often inspires you to pass it on. Gratitude multiplies. Compassion spreads. And before long, an invisible thread connects countless people who may never meet. Point 2. Building communities of trust. Society, at its core, is just a collection of relationships. And relationships thrive on trust. Spiritual acts, whether they are rooted in prayer, service, or presence, nurture that trust. Picture a neighborhood where people regularly come together to meditate, pray, or share meals. Slowly, those gatherings foster bonds deeper than casual hellos. They create safety nets where people know they belong. This is how communities grow resilient, not through wealth or technology alone, but through shared spiritual practices that remind them, we are in this together. Point 3. Healing divisions. We live in a world fractured by differences: religion, politics, culture. Too often, these differences spark conflict instead of curiosity. But spiritual acts can bridge those divides. I remember a story about two families from different faiths living next door. At first, they kept their distance, each wary of the other's beliefs. But one day, when one family faced illness, the other brought meals and offered help. That simple act of compassion became the beginning of a friendship. You see, while beliefs may separate us, spiritual acts, love, service, kindness, remind us of what we share as human beings. And in that reminder lies the seed of peace. Point 4. Inspiring collective change. When enough individuals practice spiritual acts, something bigger emerges: collective transformation. History is full of examples. Movements for justice often began not with anger alone, but with deeply spiritual practices, nonviolent resistance, songs of hope, shared prayer. These acts gave people courage to stand together, to imagine a different future, and to believe that change was possible. A society infused with spiritual practice is one where empathy guides policy, where compassion shapes culture, where service is celebrated as much as success. Point 5. The story of a village. There's a small village I once read about where every evening, just before sunset, people step outside their homes for 5 minutes of silence. No words, no noise, just stillness, together. Outsiders who visit say the atmosphere of that village feels different, calmer, more connected, more alive. What's the secret? It isn't that the villagers have more resources or fewer problems. It's that they've chosen to weave a spiritual act into the fabric of their shared life. And that choice changes everything. So when we ask, do spiritual acts really matter? The answer is yes, not only for the individual soul, but for the soul of society, because a single act of kindness may brighten one life. But when multiplied, when shared, when lived out collectively, those acts have the power to light up the world. And maybe that's the most beautiful part. Spiritual acts don't just shape me or you. They shape us. Part 6. Obstacles to spiritual practice and how to overcome them. Let me ask you honestly, how many times have you promised yourself you'd meditate every morning, only to find yourself scrolling on your phone instead? Or maybe you thought, I'll start journaling at night, but when bedtime came, you were too exhausted to even open the notebook. You see, almost everyone begins the spiritual journey with good intentions. But the truth is, the path is full of obstacles. Not because we are weak or unworthy, but because growth always meets resistance. Point 1. The obstacle of time. One of the most common excuses is, I just don't have time. Between work, family, errands, and endless notifications, carving out 10 quiet minutes feels impossible. But here's the thing, time is rarely the real issue. The real challenge is priority. We give time to what we value most. And often, we forget to value our inner life. The way through? Start small. Instead of promising yourself a full hour of meditation, try 2 minutes. Instead of a long prayer, whisper one sentence. When you shrink the practice into something doable, you remove the excuse. And those small acts, when repeated, create rhythm. Rhythm becomes habit. And habit shapes the soul. Point 2. The obstacle of distraction. Even when you sit down to practice, the mind rebels. Thoughts scatter. Groceries, deadlines, old conversations. Suddenly, 5 minutes of silence feels unbearable. But distraction isn't a sign you're failing, it's a sign you're human. The mind is like a restless puppy. You don't scold it. You gently bring it back, again and again. Some people light a candle, repeat a mantra, or focus on breath. These simple anchors train the mind, reminding it where to rest. Slowly, the chaos quiets, and you realize the noise was never stronger than your spirit. It just needed guidance. Point 3. The obstacle of doubt. Then there's doubt. That nagging voice that whispers, what's the point? Does this even work? Am I just wasting time? Doubt is heavy. It convinces you to quit before you've even started. But remember this, every meaningful journey carries moments of uncertainty. Faith isn't the absence of doubt. It's choosing to continue even when doubt speaks loudly. Point 1. Way to overcome it is to keep a record. Write down how you feel before and after your practice. Over weeks, you'll notice patterns. Calmer mornings, clearer thoughts, softer reactions. That record becomes your evidence. When doubt returns, you'll have proof that the practice is shaping you, even if slowly, even if subtly. Point 4. The obstacle of loneliness. Spiritual practice can sometimes feel lonely. Maybe your family doesn't understand why you meditate. Maybe your friends think prayer is outdated. Maybe you hesitate to talk about your rituals at all. But here's the secret, you don't have to walk the path alone. Find a community, even a small one, a group that gathers weekly, an online circle, a single friend who shares your interest. The journey is lighter when shared. And often, Hearing other struggles reminds you that your obstacles aren't unique. They're universal. Point 5. The obstacle of expectation. Finally, expectation. Many people imagine spiritual acts will bring instant peace, instant healing, instant joy. When that doesn't happen, disappointment creeps in, but spirituality isn't a quick fix. It's a slow unfolding, like a seed pushing through soil. You may not notice change day to day, but over months, even years, you'll look back and realize you're no longer the same person you once were. The solution? Release the timeline. Trust the process. Show up again and again without demanding fireworks. Let the practice be its own reward. A story of struggle and breakthrough. There was once a man who tried to meditate every day for a year. At first, he hated it. He said the silence made him restless, the stillness unbearable. He almost quit dozens of times. But he kept showing up, 5 minutes, then 10, then 20. One day, while sitting quietly, something shifted. For the first time, he felt not restless, but rooted. Not anxious, but awake. That moment didn't erase all struggle, but it reminded him why he had begun. The lesson? Obstacles are not signs to quit. They are invitations to deepen. Each challenge you face on the spiritual path is part of the journey itself. So if you've struggled to stay consistent, if you've doubted, if you've felt alone, remember this: you're not failing. You're simply walking the road every seeker must walk. And the road, as hard as it is, will lead you somewhere worth going, because every obstacle you overcome doesn't just strengthen your practice, it strengthens you. Part 7: Living spiritually in everyday life. So here we are. We've traveled through the meaning of spiritual acts, explored their forms, uncovered their power to transform the self and society, and face the obstacles that often hold us back. But maybe now you're asking, what do I do with all this? How do I live spiritually, not just in special moments, but every single day? The answer is both simple and profound. You weave it into the fabric of your ordinary life. Point 1. Spirituality. In small moments, you don't need a monastery or a mountain to be spiritual. You can breathe deeply before a stressful meeting. You can pause to notice the colors of the sky during your commute. You can whisper a silent thank you before you eat. These tiny acts may look ordinary, but they are doorways. Doorways into presence, gratitude, and awareness. And when repeated daily, they transform the way you move through the world. Point 2. The everyday sacred. Think about the way you wash dishes. Usually, it's a chore, something to get done quickly. But what if, instead, you approached it as a ritual? Feel the warm water on your hands. Hear the clinking of the plates. Notice the rhythm. Suddenly, even washing dishes becomes a meditation. That's the secret. Anything can be sacred when done with awareness. Folding clothes, watering plants, talking with a loved one. Every act has the potential to carry spiritual meaning, if you bring intention into it. Point 3. Relationships as spiritual practice. We often imagine spirituality as solitary, just you and your inner self. But some of the deepest spiritual work happens in relationships. Every time you listen fully without interrupting, you practice presence. Every time you forgive when it's easier to stay bitter, you practice compassion. Every time you choose kindness when no one is watching, you practice love. Relationships are the perfect training ground for the soul. They teach us patience, humility, empathy. And in learning to love others, we also learn to love ourselves. Point 4. Returning to the breath. No matter where you are, chaotic city street, busy office, noisy household, your breath is always with you. A spiritual anchor, hidden in plain sight. Whenever you feel lost, return to the breath. Inhale slowly. Exhale gently. That simple act brings you back home, again and again. Point 5. A story of quiet transformation. There was a woman who thought spirituality was beyond her reach. She wasn't religious. She didn't have time for retreats. She barely had energy after work. But one day, she decided to light a candle each night before bed. Nothing more, nothing less. That tiny ritual became her anchor. Over time, she found herself calmer, more centered. She noticed beauty in ordinary things. She became more patient with her children. Her life didn't change overnight, but she changed in it. And isn't that the point? Spirituality doesn't require us to escape life. It asks us to live it more deeply. Point 6. An invitation to you. So here's the invitation. Don't wait for the perfect moment, the perfect teacher, or the perfect place. Begin now. In this moment. Take a breath. Whisper a thank you. Place your hand on your heart and feel it beating. That simple awareness is already a spiritual ACT to the end of the day. Spirituality isn't about floating above life. It's about diving fully into it. It's about seeing the sacred hidden in the ordinary and allowing those moments to guide us back to ourselves, back to one another, and back to what truly matters. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real significance of spiritual acts. Not that they take us away from the world, but that they bring us more deeply into it. Tonight, as you close your eyes, remember, every act can be a prayer, every breath can be a meditation, and every moment can be holy, if only you let it.